Well, thanks everyone for joining. I appreciate it. Well, certainly down here in Plymouth, it's a sunny evening. So joining us and spending your time with us today is much appreciated. So, like I mentioned, we're talking about the kind of the data side of things and how that citizen science can support and influence policy at the UK. But I've added the and beyond bit. So I'm going to give a kind of brief overview before I hand over to some of the other experts in the data team. So here at the MBA down in the southwest of the UK in Plymouth, we run something called DASSH, which is the UK Archive for Marine Species and Habitats Data. It's a centre of excellence for biodiversity data management. So we make sure that all that data that people collect, individuals, organisations, is made as freely available as possible, because we all know marine data is difficult to collect, whether it's going down to the shore on a rainy day or chartering a boat to get out into choppy waters. It costs a lot of money, and you get one chance to do it. You get one snapshot to collect that data. So why not share it and make it as useful as possible? So we are a data archive centre. We are accredited to show that we know what we're doing, that we can meet certain standards and criteria. And we currently have in excess of 6 million records of species from around the UK and the adjacent waters, from over 200 organisations. And like I say, we work with everything from individual citizen scientists through to big multinationals. And we're able to do the work we do because we get funding from DEFRA and Scottish Government, but also from an organisation or a group called MEDIN, the Marine Environmental Data and Information Network, plus bits of project work here and there that we add to our funding. So for those not familiar with MEDIN, it's a fantastic partnership that the UK has established to help share all types of marine environmental data. So everything from the biodiversity, the species and habitats that sort of we specialize in, through to things like the sediment, the chemical composition of the water column, wrecks, cables, everything that you might find in the water column and on the seabed is coordinated and managed through MEDIN. So it's got more than 60 partners across the UK, and in total there's more than 18,000 marine data sets available, with a huge number of records sitting under that. And it's divided into sort of thematic areas of expertise. So like I say, we are the data archive centre for species and habitats, flora, fauna and habitats. And there's been quite a lot of investment over the last 20 years from the UK in this system to make sure that we are able to provide the infrastructure to share marine data. And so I suppose there's a question about, does MEDIN work? About 4 or 5 years ago, we undertook a cost benefit analysis, and it showed, I'm not going to go into the details on this slide, but it showed that for every pound that the UK invests in managing marine data properly, you get £8 in value back. So this cost benefit analysis of good data management practice really kind of speaks for itself. It also meant that we were able to then not just share within the UK, because we made sure we were all communicating, we were all standardizing our data, we were standardizing the way we describe and talk about data. So we're able to do that at the UK scale, not just, again, within the marine domain, but also with terrestrial biodiversity as well. So if you're looking at coastal developments, for example, in sort of transitional waters or estuaries, you need to know what's happening with the freshwater, with the terrestrial and with the marine. So we're able to share data with the UK National Biodiversity Network as the source of terrestrial biodiversity data, but we're also able to share data at the European and global scale. So we do a lot of work with those communities about standardizing data, and there is a UN initiative called OBIS, the Ocean Biodiversity Information System, and this operates globally through nodes in different countries. So we provide the UK node at the MBA, and again we provide common access, open access to standardized data. So what does OBIS allow us to do? Well, because individuals, because organizations, because governments are all sharing their data openly and using the kind of the best practice to do it, it allows the data that we collect in the UK by individuals, by every scale, to contribute to global and regional assessments. So again, the UN undertakes the State of the Ocean report, 2 iterations of that data from the UK, from OBIS and from DASSH have fed into that. There's World Ocean Assessment, there's assessments of harmful algal blooms, and again, the data that's being collected through initiatives like the Rockpool Project, when it contributes to these data systems that we manage and we provide standards and expertise on, means it can then flow to policy making and decision making at the UK scale, so things like designation of marine protected areas, sustainable fisheries, or ensuring that coastal development, wind farms, for example, happen in a managed and sustainable way, and the ongoing monitoring is in place to support those as well. And then also, as I say, that data then, because of the standards we use, flows up to the global scale. So that's a very quick overview of why we do what we do. I'm going to hand over now to some of our experts from the data team. They're going to give you some more specific examples about the work that we do and how it's applicable to policies. So with that, I am going to stop talking, stop sharing, and hand over to Julie.
Hello, everyone. Just give me a moment to share my screen. There we are. Can we see that?
Yep.
Okay, so during a recent citizen science event organised by the Rockpool Project that DASSH attended, the citizen scientists had two main questions. And the first was, how can I make my data useful to policymakers? And the second was, where does the data go and what is it used for? So if you volunteered for the Rockpool Project, then you'll be familiar with iNaturalist. And iNaturalist is a global citizen science platform with over 3 million users and well over 200 million observations. And iNaturalist has branches across the world who regularly meet with the aim to share their work and improve the way that their data is collected. So iNaturalist UK is run by ourselves, along with the MEDIN Trust and the Biological Records Centre. And we often collaborate with our other organisations in the UK. So by using a platform like iNaturalist, you're already collecting data that is useful. So you can see that from this observation that the record contains an image of the species, the date and the time of the observation, and the exact coordinates of where the sighting was made. And this information is incredibly important, and it will potentially allow this data to be shared with other data aggregators in the UK and globally. So iNaturalist require that 2 out of 3 verifiers have to agree on the identity of a species before it's given the research grade label, which will allow it to move on to the next stage of the data path. And this is the reason that the Rockpool Project asks for as many verifications after their events as possible. And that's to ensure that data can be used, going forwards. So this diagram shows the wider data flow. And you can see the Rockpool Project data flowing into iNaturalist. And those observations that have reached research grade will go into iRecord, which is operated by the Biological Records Centre. And then these records will then be checked by their experts. So iRecord can be used to record one-off sightings in the UK, and it not only draws on data from iNaturalist, but also other UK projects, both terrestrial and marine. And from here, verified data flows into the NBN Atlas, which is the UK's largest repository of publicly available biodiversity data, both terrestrial and marine again. So UK marine data is then shared between the NBN Trust and DASSH, and where it will also be shared with MEDIN. And then it's at this stage that it's also converted into Darwin Core format, and it's made available on our IPT. So DASSH often receive one-off sightings, and then we also archive marine data sets from various government organisations, scientists and universities. And again, our data is mostly open access, and policymakers and the public are able to search and download our data on our DASSH mapper, which I've linked in the QR code. Sorry, Dan's shown you this slide already. But yeah, as he said, we make up one of the 60+ partners in MEDIN. And our data from DASSH is put into a standardised MEDIN format. And this goes through a strict QA process before being published on the MEDIN portal. And again, the MEDIN portal is open to all and can be accessed easily. So I've already mentioned that we use MEDIN and Darwin core formats, and this enables us to share data between the different data aggregators. And we also use some controlled vocabs for the equipment, coordinates and species. And these allow us to keep everything standardized, and it helps to deal with any ambiguities we may have. So for example, a cushion star found in the UK is a completely different species to a cushion star that's found in South Africa. So using the controlled vocabulary, iSeahorse IDs found in worms, we can ensure that everyone is clear which species has been found. So if we go back to that data flow chart, I just wanted to show you the wider picture. So the data from the NBN eventually reaches GBIF. And again, this also deals with the terrestrial data. And then the marine data that's been converted to Darwin Core is on our IPT. And this can be harvested by European data aggregators, such as EuroBIS, EMODNet, and then OBIS, the Ocean Biodiversity Information System, which is a global aggregator. So how does this data flow incorporate your non-native species data? So the Rockpool project, ourselves and Natural England got together and we compiled a list of non-native marine species of interest. And these flag species are now automatically pulled from verified Rockpool project data in iNaturalist and sent over to Natural England. And this enables Natural England to act swiftly to assess the threat of non-native species and mitigate their spread. So at the end of last year, a report showed that less than 1% of the UK's biodiversity budget is spent on tackling invasive species. So the government have announced that they are investing 10 million to strengthen UK biosecurity. I also just wanted to mention an EU project, the DTO Bioflow, or the digital twin of the ocean. So the EU digital twin of the ocean is a digital replica of the ocean and its processes. So the DTO will enable modelling of the distribution of non-native species throughout Europe, and it takes into account factors such as climate change, and it should be able to predict the level of spread of non-native species. So for example, Sargassum muticum, or Japanese wireweed, is becoming quite a problem. There are huge swathes of it in the ocean at the moment. This responds in the same way to eutrophication and upwelling as phytoplankton. So the DTO can be used to predict where an increase in sargassum may occur. So hopefully that's given you an insight into how your data is used. And I'm now going to hand you over to Lizzie, our data officer, and she's going to explain a little more about the species that probably is reported to DASSH the most, the Chinese mitten crab. Okay, over to you, Lizzie.
Hello everyone. I just need to share my screen. You will see that all right. I need to present it. Oh, hang on. This thing's getting in the way. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to talk about the Mitten Crab Watch, which is a project established by the Marine Biological Association and the Natural History Museum to understand the distribution of mitten crabs in the UK. So the scientific name for mitten crabs is Eriochir sinensis, and they are an extremely invasive species of burrowing crab that originated from Southeast Asia and were first reported in the UK in 1935 in the River Thames. They are thought to have arrived in the ballast water or attached to the hulls of cargo ships. Adult mitten crabs are usually found in freshwater habitats such as rivers or lakes, but will migrate downstream to mate in estuaries, with females travelling further towards the sea, meaning that they are adapted to both freshwater and saltwater habitats. Females lay between 250,000 to 1 million eggs, which is the reason for their fast spread across the UK. They are one of the most damaging invasive species in the UK waters, as they cause ecological harm by outcompeting with native species such as the white-clawed crayfish, and they destabilise riverbanks and cause siltation in gravel runs, which disrupts habitats used for spawning by salmon and trout. They are also pests to anglers and waterway workers as they damage fishing gear and flood defences. The DASSH webpage on mitten crabs contains more background information, a video on the damage caused by mitten crabs, and a guide on how to identify and submit sightings of them. And that's a QR code at the top. So mitten crabs are the only crab in UK freshwater as they usually burrow in sediment banks of lakes and rivers. However, they can be found in saltwater habitats as well, so can easily be confused with coastal species. They can be identified by their greyish-green colour and their squarish body, or their carapace that can be up to 56 millimetres wide, narrowing towards the front where there are 12 teeth, which are spiky edges of the carapace, and they're arranged in a 4+4+4 pattern, and their legs are around twice the length of their body. They are most well known for their fluffy claws, which gives them their name mitten crabs, as they have dense brown fur around their white-tipped claws. However, juveniles lack this fur and are harder to identify. The GB Non-Native Species Secretariat have a detailed mitten crab ID guide that can be downloaded and followed. So you can see from this animated map that the mitten crabs have spread across the UK very quickly in the past couple of decades. However, the full extent of this spread is unclear. This is why the Mitten Crab Watch project was set up by the NBA and the Natural History Museum to encourage citizen science efforts to keep track of the spread. Data is collected by members of the public submitting their sightings either through the iNaturalist or iRecord app, or sent straight to us at DASSH where we record the sightings for them. The recorded data is then shared with the National Biodiversity Network where the distribution data is stored. This data can then be used for projects that aim to mitigate the spread of mitten crabs. For example, we share our mitten crab records with Dr. Paul Clark from the Natural History Museum, who is using the distribution data to control mitten crab numbers by testing traps in Pode Hill in Lincolnshire that aim to prevent the crabs migrating to their breeding grounds. So if you happen to spot a mitten crab, make sure to follow the identification steps, upload a clear photo along with the date, time and location to iNaturalist or iRecord, or just send it to us at dashinquiries@mba.ac.uk. That is all. Thank you for listening. I will now pass you over to Gemma, who will talk about Pacific oysters.
Hello, everybody. There is my screen. Does that look okay? I'm going to take that as a yes.
It's not shared yet.
I can't
Oh.
see it.
Sorry, I did click it. Share. Oh, I didn't press share. Oh, that would be why. Is that better?
It's there. Yes, thank you.
Okay, fabulous. So I'm going to be talking a little bit about the Pacific oyster as a non-native species in the UK. Its scientific name is Magellana gigas, and it has a whole list of different common names as shown on the right-hand side of the screen. This bivalve mollusk is a very important species for aquaculture throughout the world. We're going to talk a little bit about where it originates and how its distribution has spread in the last few centuries. So it's native to the Northwest Pacific around parts of Russia, Japan, Korea, and China. And it was introduced to Washington and California in the US, overseas from Japan, as well as Hawaii, Australia, and a whole load of other places around the globe today. The Pacific oyster has now been introduced to at least 60 countries. These introductions can happen unintentionally, as it did in New Zealand in the 1950s, by being carried by boats, for example, by ballast water, as Lizzie mentioned. This is water that is carried on ships when at sea to stabilize the boat and compensate for any weight changes, for example, when fuel is used or there's variation in cargo load levels. This ensures a safe operating condition throughout the duration of a voyage. This water is then expelled at a different location than its origin and poses a significant environmental risk. There have been more strict rules around managing discharging ballast water since 2017, and newer ships are equipped with ballast water management systems that treat the water. This is hard to monitor, however. However, the introduction to some locations, such as the UK in the late 1800s to early 1900s, was intentional. This was for aquaculture purposes in response to declining commercially viable native oyster stocks. The Pacific oyster has been farmed on around 300 sites throughout England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland. You can see the spread from this short video. I'm just going to come off and try
Yeah,
again.
thanks.
There we go. Where was I? When the Pacific oyster was introduced, UK water temperature regimes allowed oysters to grow but inhibited reproduction. And since then, water temperatures have risen with global warming and spawning events have increased in frequency in the farm stocks as well as the wild populations. As temperatures in the water continue to increase, it's predicted that there will be a greater likelihood of survival to reproductive age, therefore even more oysters, as well as even more spawning events due to more warm days and a longer spawning season. Pacific oysters are fertile animals, with a single female oyster potentially releasing up to 50 million eggs into the water column. The developing larvae are planktonic, allowing dispersal away from the immobile adults. Consequently, aquaculture plots have the potential to be a significant source of larvae to the surrounding area to spread these populations even further. The increasing population of Pacific oysters can have implications on some ecosystems by rapidly colonizing soft, muddy shores and creating large, sharp oyster reefs that can smother native species and injure people, dogs, and damage boats. They expand outside of licensed aquaculture sites, and according to Natural England, in the last 5 years, there has been an increased concern about the spread of Pacific oysters in MPAs, with some sites being reported as being in unfavorable condition. There are currently no UK-based studies on the impacts of Pacific oysters on seagrass beds, but there is evidence that this species is having a detrimental impact on existing intertidal seagrass beds in the US, with reduced density and reduced shoot size. This is quite worrying because areas such as seagrass beds are very important for carbon sequestration, and they're being damaged by these non-native oysters. Pacific oysters cover 100% of the shore in some areas, and with particular areas of concern in the southwest, including the Plymouth Sound, Whitsand, and Looe Bay. With these rising temperatures and increased spawning events, it's likely that the expansion of dense Pacific oyster populations will reduce species richness and change community composition if it's left unmanaged. This species can have a positive impact, however. According to NOAA Fisheries, Pacific oyster farming is said to be a smart seafood choice due to the fact they don't require feeding past the larval stage, only phytoplankton from the water column. They can help improve local water quality and create clearer waters that can potentially promote the growth of seagrass and larger seaweeds. They can also supposedly stabilize coral sediments and reduce impacts from storm surges. As I mentioned previously, it's also a very important, economically important trade for many countries. For example, valuing at around $221 million in the US in 2019. So what is the solution to this species and its rapidly growing and dispersing population? We need to carry on gathering more data on the oyster densities at which community composition and habitat function is altered on varying marine habitats. This advises us where hotspots might be, where culling might have a positive impact. Submitting any sightings to this database of more than 11,000 sightings on iNaturalist is a great way to do this. This allows us to further understand the distribution of this non-native species. Groups of volunteers and citizen scientists have successfully carried out a large number of Pacific oyster culls on rocky shores over a period of 2 or more years. This significantly reduced the population growth rate. However, it is apparent from previous surveys that some people don't want to partake in the killing of live shellfish, so they could partake in surveys instead and get involved with data collection. Identifying potential locations for culling is very useful, as well as monitoring the impact of these culling events. Investigating the costs and logistics and best methods for removal that do not damage sensitive habitats is also very important. We need to fully understand the impact of rising sea temperatures on populations by using species distribution modeling and consider the impact of marine heat waves. To summarize, the Pacific oyster is a non-native species that originates in the Northwest Pacific and has spread to more than 60 countries. Global warming is boosting these populations further, although we understand that Magellana gekas can have a positive impact on our lives, such as making lots of money through aquaculture and being a relatively sustainable product, as well as filtering local water. However, its rapid population growth and ability to colonize areas with its sharp reefs and outcompete local species is quite concerning. So we need to emphasize gathering more data is very useful in advising strategies such as culling, and volunteer collaboration and more scientific research can help us to gain better control of the Pacific oyster population in the UK. That is the end of my section. Thank you very much for listening. I'm going to pass over to Ellen.
Lovely, thanks very much, Gemma. Can I just check that you can all see my screen there? Are we all okay? Yeah.
Yeah, perfect.
Okay, so we've heard already this evening about how citizen science data is affecting policy in the UK. I'm going to run through now and talk about something that's not only impacting policy in the UK, but also a little bit further afield as well. So we're looking at more of a global scale. So I'm going to talk to you about a unique project that's already shown to be having quite an impact, and it's basically the iSeahorse project, which is a collaboration between iNaturalist and Project Seahorse as well. And this project really empowers citizen scientists, just like you and me, to directly contribute to marine conservation. And that's through documenting observations of one of the ocean's most fascinating, but also vulnerable and protected species, which is the seahorse. So iSeahorse has been helping us to better understand seahorse populations and also to protect their fragile habitats. So if we dive in a little bit further, so the project iSeahorse has now been helping to protect seahorses for over a decade. And in that time, the project has received almost 17,000 different observations of 43 different seahorse species, and that's from over 3,000 different citizen scientists. And observations have been recorded all across the globe, so all the way from the west coast of America, right the way across to New Zealand. And iSeahorse is basically a project on iNaturalist that allows you to upload your observations. And the power of it really is that any people from anywhere in the world can use it, and it can help to improve our understanding of seahorses and protect them from the threats that they're facing, like habitat destruction, overfishing, and climate change as well, but to name a few. So anyone can join the iSeahorse project, whether you're a diver, whether you're a scientist, you're a fisher, or you just really love seahorses. And just by uploading your photos and the details of the observation to iNaturalist, you're helping to advocate for their protection. And your data can then be used to help understand seahorse behavior and also the ranges of different species as well. And as I say, the threats that they're facing too. And iSeahorse has actually already been shown to make a difference. And that's through prompting creation of a marine protected area, an MPA, in the village of Anda in the Philippines. So it just goes to show the impact that it's already been having, which is fantastic. So of all the observations that have occurred so far, these are the species of seahorse that have been seen most often. So you can see at the top there is the big belly seahorse with 2,878 different observations. The white seahorse, the short-snouted seahorse, the common seahorse, and then we've got the spiny, or also known as the long-snouted seahorse, down there at the bottom too. So if you'd like to get involved, you can use the QR code that's on the screen at the moment to have a little bit of a more in-depth look at what I'm talking through now. But basically all you need to do is sign into iNaturalist or create an account if you don't already have one. And you'll be asked information about your seahorse observation. So as you can see on screen, it's just asking you for quite simple things about what it was that you saw, where you saw it. If you've got a photo to upload as well, that would be helpful to help with to confirm the identification of it. And then, sorry, it's a little bit small, but hopefully you can just about see it there. It asks you a little bit more information about your observation. So how many seahorses you saw, what sort of habitat you found them in, you know, whether it was in a seagrass habitat, in an estuary, what you were doing at the time. So if you were intentionally going out to look for seahorses, what depth you found them at, and just a few more bits of information there about the actual observation itself. So iSeahorse as well also allows you to search through existing records. So you can either look for a particular species if you wanted to, or for instance, if you wanted to look in a specific area, you can do that too. Though it's really important to say at this stage that the exact coordinates of the observations are hidden. So you wouldn't be able to have a look on there and see the exact place where a potential seahorse habitat would be, but it gives you sort of a general idea of the rough area. So if we look a little bit more sort of locally to where we are down here in the southwest, you can see that there's been a few observations of seahorses around the coast here. So we've had some off the south coast of Devon, we've had one off the north coast of Cornwall, just near Padstow there, and also some off the Dorset coast as well. And interestingly, all of the observations from Devon and Cornwall are of the short-snouted seahorse, and then the records from the Dorset coast are of the long-snouted seahorse. So thanks to iSeahorse, we're really learning more than ever before about these charismatic and often quite mysterious fish. And citizen scientists, through collecting their data, have helped to uncover new habitats and identified expanded geographic ranges and previously unknown depths of where seahorses are living. The project has also revealed some new insights into seahorse biology, and that's included their patterns in sex ratios and pregnancy seasonality as well. And a team from Project Seahorse, which is based sort of between the University of British Columbia and the Zoological Society of London, so ZSL, have analysed some of the data from iSeahorse. One of the people that worked on this paper was actually Heather Coldway, who is a member of the MBA Board of Trustees as well. So they basically reviewed the findings from iSeahorse data, and this was related to 35 of the known 46 seahorse species. So this is all based off of observations that have been recorded on iSeahorse. And one of the real sort of standout discoveries was about the Coleman's pygmy seahorse, and the observations have suggested that its geographic range is actually thousands of square kilometres larger than they previously thought. And they've also found that it occupies sort of a broader variety of habitats and lives in much shallower waters than what we thought before as well. So this really shows that by comparing the data on iSeahorse with the IUCN Red List assessment, so what's currently already known about them, sort of researchers that were working on this have found that 80% of seahorse species were actually found in previously unrecorded habitats, which is really interesting. If you did want to read more about this, you can find more sort of in-depth details about the results of this study in this paper, which is Advances in the Life History Knowledge for 35 Seahorse Species from the Community Science. So obviously we're talking about seahorse observations. I think it's worthwhile just running through some of the best practice and the guidance around seahorse observations as well. So if you're actually wanting to actively seek out seahorses and photograph them, you do actually need a wildlife license from the MMO to do that. However, If you randomly encounter a seahorse, the guidelines are basically that you can take 1 or 2 photos without a flash, and that's acceptable to provide a record. And you should observe that seahorse for no longer than 5 minutes. But if that seahorse starts to show any signs of distress, so if it starts to go dark in colour, or it drops down to the seabed or turns its back on you, you should slowly retreat, and avoid any sudden movement whilst you're doing that as well. You shouldn't chase, disturb or touch a seahorse. They are actually protected under Section 9 of the Wildlife and Countryside Act 1981, and it is an offence to disturb them. And of course, though, it's a really exciting experience to spot a seahorse out in the wild. If you do see one, it's best for both you and the seahorse just to keep your distance and just to calmly observe as well. And of course, if the seahorse swims away, don't pursue it. One of the key things as well is not to disclose the location of that observation on social media. Just keep that information to yourself, but obviously report it on iNaturalist. So hopefully you'll be able to see that this project is really highlighting the value of citizen science in expanding our understanding of marine life, so in this case seahorses, and also helping to bridge really critical knowledge gaps as well. Thank you very much for listening. If you did want to get involved, you can use that QR code on screen now.
Okay, I'll just share my screen again a moment. So I hope you enjoyed that. Before we start the questions, I'd just like to say, if you wanted to support our science, you can join the MBA's membership scheme. And until the 31st of May, we've got a £25 discount off the membership if you use the code OCEAN25. I hope you can see the QR code there.
Not pounds.
What did I say? Oh, pounds. Oh, sorry. Yes, percent. Glad you spotted that, Dan. Hopefully you can see the QR code on my screen. It's buried under everyone's photos, but we'll put a link in the chat or something as well. And the other thing we wanted to say is, if you want to get involved, join the National BioBlitz organised by the Rockpool Project. Again, scan the QR code and sign up. Okay, do we have any questions? We might have some in the chat there.
Yeah, I think there are. Well, first of
on.
all, thank you, DASSH team, for sharing with us tonight. And I think there are 2 questions in the chat. Oh, Dan already replied to one.
I mean, there might be a better answer from someone else in the team, but there was a question about whether there's non-natives that aren't of concern. I don't know if Julie or someone else wants to pick that up.
Yeah, so some non-native species may live alongside our native species and they may not cause huge problems. But the invasive species tend to outcompete our local species for food and for their environment. And that's when they really become a problem and that we need to do something about them.
I think there's examples as well, you know, where things have been invasive, maybe sort of decades or possibly hundreds of years ago, but have now sort of reached an equilibrium with our own native fauna as well, flora and fauna. So at some point, you know, that can balance out, but we're seeing the kind of cases we've highlighted today are some of those more extreme cases. Ellen, there was a question about the seahorses as well. Is that what you've replied to? If a seahorse seems to come near you and seems happy, is that also bad and should you leave it?
Yeah, so I've just put a little link in the chat there just for a little bit more information on the guidance around the sort of behaviours that you'd be looking out for. So it does go into quite a lot of detail there about the specific things that a seahorse will do if it's showing signs of stress. So I guess the key thing with that is to, you know, really keep an eye on what sort of behavior that seahorse is showing, and just to follow the guidance as it says on there, you know, just don't stay for longer than 5 minutes. Don't make any sudden movements, those sorts of things as well. And I think that's the best way to get the best possible sightings of them as well.
Thanks, Ellen.
Hopefully that helps.
Yeah, I think that was all the questions. There was one about mitten crabs as well, but Julie answered that in line. So yeah, unless anyone's got any other questions they want to drop in, can hand back to
I
Loretta.
actually have a
Oh,
question.
yeah.
It might be a silly one. But I just wonder if any if scientists can actually use the data that they collected on iNaturalist for the paper. Like, is it can they cite the record on iNaturalist?
I'm pausing to let Julie answer that, but do you want me to take it, Julie?
Yes, please.
Yeah, so every iNaturalist record has an identifier with it that you can use. So, and it also goes into, so if you were using, for example, OBIS or GBIF, which collates the iNaturalist data, so you can look at iNaturalist alongside other data sets if you're interested in a particular taxa or group of taxa. When you download that, you get a DOI, a digital object identifier. And so that's what we use to ensure data citation. So data citation isn't as excuse me, as well sort of evolved as citing papers, but it is, yeah, more and more people use these digital object identifiers. So it's a little string of letters and numbers that means you can uniquely identify that data set, and the iNaturalist records have a DOI that goes with them to allow you to cite it.
Oh, that's really cool. I didn't know that. Thank you. Any other questions? Feel free to unmute yourself or pop in the chat if you have any other questions. Looks good.
You've obviously answered everything.
Yeah.
I mean, I dropped a lot of links in, particularly while Julie was talking, to some of the kind of introductory stuff. And so, yeah, there's links there for people to follow. Oh, there's a question from Valerie, just dropped. Citizen data being used to implement policy in the UK. Yeah, absolutely. So the data team at the MBA undertook the largest collation of species and habitats records. This is sort of when DASSH was relatively young, kind of about 10 years ago. And that was when we, maybe 15 years ago now, when we started with the designation of marine protected areas in the UK. And citizen science data fed very heavily into that, and was published transparently as well, because in order to make sure that you've got that trust in the process, you know, there was a whole consultation, so we had to make the data publicly available for that. So data collected through a number of citizen science projects contributed to that. And also routinely, there's obviously the Rockpool project is feeding into Natural England's non-natives early detection systems, but there's a scheme for divers called Sea Search, and that's used very heavily. That's a UK-wide initiative with structured surveys for divers, and that's used very heavily by Natural England, Natural Resources Wales, and Nature Scot, the kind of the nature conservation bodies, and feeds into their ongoing condition assessment. So marine protected areas get assessed by good, and Ireland as well. Yeah, I mean, it's a fantastic scheme, Sea Search is, and we partner with them. But yeah, they're used in the condition assessment of all the marine protected areas and the monitoring that the SNCBs, the nature conservation bodies, do. Yeah, and it's actually quite a small world, the marine biological world in the UK. But it's really, the UK is leading the way with this sort of sharing of data and the open data approach, and the standardizing of data. So I've been at a number of meetings at sort of the European and global scale where the MEDIN approach and the way that we do things in DASSH and the systems that the Rockpool project's implementing for data transparency and data flow, and it's being held up as a really sort of, you know, world leading example. So we can take a lot of credit for that. And it's, I say, MEDIN is the kind of the overarching partnership that drives that forward, but it's only made possible by the people who contribute to it.
Thank you so much. Thank you, DASSH team. Thank you, everybody, for joining us this evening.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.